Unless you're a divorce lawyer, if you're not actually thinking about divorce, the things that you know about divorce, frankly, are probably because of things you've heard. There are two main sources for them. One is news coverage of celebrity divorces, who got what, how that worked, where we're fighting about the kids, where we're fighting about money. That kind of stuff tends to hit the news. So even if you're not paying close attention ambiently, that's probably in your concept of what divorce is like. The other thing is people that you know, whether they're in your home state, like in my case, Connecticut, or whether they live somewhere else, and how someone else's divorce went can really shape your concept of how divorce generally works. And one of the reasons that's dangerous is that divorce is one of the things that is governed by state law. There aren't federal laws that talk about how things will be divided, how money will flow, how custody will work, how you'll parent your kids, how child support or alimony will be paid. That is a creature of state law. And there are some commonalities from state to state, but there's no normal all 50 states approach to how divorce works. And so when your concept of how things work in a divorce comes from sort of media coverage of celebrities who may have or may not have had a prenup, which can really change everything, or the idiosyncrasies of one friend or family member's divorce, whether it's in your state or another state, can really skew your understanding of what'll happen. One of the things that is upsetting about that is that people, if they do want to end an unhappy marriage, sometimes they believe their understanding of how divorce works so deeply that they make decisions based on that understanding. And what I really want to make sure you do is get in front of an attorney in your state and get specific information, not just about your state, but about your situation, so that you're making decisions based in reality, not in a hypothetical that kind of crept into your psyche from the media or a friend. So there are some common misunderstandings of things we hear about Connecticut divorce that just aren't accurate. And again, it's reasonable that people have these misunderstandings. They don't live and breathe divorce like I do and like my colleagues at Freed Marcroft do, right? You're a normal human being. So you might think that Connecticut is one of those states where it's a 50-50 state. Some people call them community property states. Some people call them 50-50 states. We actually aren't. But if you think if you get divorced, that automatically the answer is 50-50 down the line of each asset, one half of the house, one half of the retirement, one half of the Van Gogh, whatever it is, then you're going to be really off on how Connecticut does things. Connecticut has a really different concept of property division that's called equitable division. So while things might wind up at 50-50, they would get there because the court decided that that was a fair and equitable result, or because the two of you reached an agreement on what the two of you thought, together with your lawyer's advice, was an equitable result. So that's one of the main things that we hear about Connecticut that can kind of throw people off when they hear how it actually works as compared to how they think it might work. So Connecticut has its own laws about divorce. So throughout the state, the laws about divorce, the case law, the statutes, they're all the same, whether you're in West Hartford or Westport. The law is the same. But that doesn't mean how judges tend to interpret the law is exactly the same. And it certainly doesn't mean that your experience from one courthouse to the other courthouse will be the same. Let me give you a few examples. So on the interpretation of the law, there just tend to be certain conventions that might be different in Hartford County or Middlesex County than they are, for example, in Fairfield County or New Haven County. You're going to want to meet with a lawyer who works in that in that courthouse to make sure you get really, really honed advice on how judges tend to view certain things. And by the way, judges in Connecticut move around. So if I were a judge starting out in family court in the quiet corner, and later on I get transferred to the family court in Middletown, you want to work with an attorney who's familiar with that judge. And in some cases, I think I love working with my colleagues at Freed Marcroft because we practice in all the state courts, all of the family courts throughout Connecticut. So if a judge, for example, moves from New Haven over to Hartford, we have someone internally who was more familiar with that judge when they were down in New Haven, who can share with their colleagues some insights about how that judge tends to perceive alimony or property division or parenting. Another thing that is very useful about having local counsel is all of the courts in Connecticut, they're not equally busy. So if time is one of the things you're conscious of when you're in the context of your own divorce, certain courts are speedier than others. And this changes, right? How heavy a court's docket doesn't always stay consistent. One of the things about Connecticut is in some cases, there are opportunities to file in a different jurisdiction, depending on where you live and where your spouse lives, that might tend to support your desired outcome, particularly when it comes to picking a court that might have less of a delay before you can, for example, get a hearing. How robust is an individual court's options to assist with judicial pretrials or special masters pretrials, some of the tools that courts use to help people resolve things without having to go to a hearing and have a judge decide. So when you have a state-specific practice, you get the insights of all of the courthouses that exist in Connecticut so that we can really dial in what will be among the options that you have the best fit for you and your goals. One of the things that people also get confused about, because it's true in some states and they may assume it's true in Connecticut, but it's not true in Connecticut, is whether or not you have to be legally separated before you get a divorce. In Connecticut, you do not. This is one of the reasons it is so important to talk to a lawyer. Don't get stuck being miserable about something that may or may not be true. Just hire an attorney who understands and can give you the information you need to make the best decisions for yourself. So when we're thinking about a legal separation, it is true that in some states, people have to live separately before they can get divorced. That's not the case in Connecticut. And in fact, in Connecticut, you don't even have to live separately during the divorce. Some people stay living together after the divorce. It's rare. Doesn't work for everyone, for sure. But it's important to know that there's no law or rule in Connecticut that you have to have a legal separation before you can get divorced, or that you have to live separately either before or during the divorce. Those just aren't things in Connecticut. Another Connecticut-specific thing that can get confusing because it's not the case in every state is what's a legal separation? So a legal separation in Connecticut, again, is formally filed like a divorce. It's not just living separately. It's formally filing a legal separation. It looks like a divorce. The court can help you with parenting, it can help you with alimony, child support, property division. It can do almost all of the things in a legal separation than it can do in a divorce. And again, this is just Connecticut I'm talking about. States have very different rules around what separation or legal separation is. The main difference in Connecticut between a couple who went through a legal separation and a couple who went through the divorce process is that in the context of a legal separation, you can't get remarried. That's the big difference. If you have Connecticut-specific questions about divorce, about how things work with property division or alimony, parenting, about which courts are busier or faster or anything like that, give us a call at Freed Marcroft. Because we practice across the state, one member of our team at least will have the answers to what you're wondering.